Hey everyone, my name is Brian and you're watching DC Unleashed, and I have an incredible video for you today. A theory that I had been thinking about, wondering about, and researching for the last month and a half now. And I think that I have put together a credible amount of evidence that supports this insane but exciting theory. And I want to get right into it. But first, if you are not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. And on the way there, hit the like button. And do me a favor, hit the comment section and let me know what you think about what I'm about to say. Agree or disagree, that doesn't matter. Let's have a conversation because I think there is credible evidence to this theory. Let's go. I'm just going to come out and say it. Could Henry Cavill, the very face of Superman in the last decade, could he be secretly returning to James Gunn's Superman? The brand new reboot for the DC, could it actually include Henry Cavill, the actor that played the previous version of Superman that many love? Could he be returning to the role or a version of the role? That's the question I'm asking you today, and it sounds nuts. The answer sounds like it's a verifiable no. Of course not. James Gunn is not going to do that. There is no evidence to support Henry Cavill's return to the DC universe. But there is. There's actual evidence to support this theory, and there's a lot of it. When I first heard about this, I thought it was nuts. No way. But the more I researched, the longer I went down the rabbit hole of Henry Cavill's return to the DC universe via this movie, the more I am convinced that either they want us to think it could happen or it could actually be happening. And I believe that this evidence actually supports this insane theory, and it's made me even more excited to learn what's in store for Superman in this upcoming movie. So yes, it's been a pretty wild theory that's been gaining some traction, but I don't think everyone has approached it in the way I'm approaching it right now. I'm going to connect the dots between the trailers, the promotional materials, the toys, and yes, the new DC multiverse storyline that we're seeing sort of unfold through all this marketing material. By the end of this video, I hope that you can decide for yourself if you think the return of Cavill as a masked villain is actually a possibility, whether that excites you or whether you think it's insane and it's not something you want to see. I want to know what you think, but let's get into it right now. The first piece of our puzzle is the multiverse, a concept now front and center in DC's on-screen universe in 2023's The Flash. The movie effectively unveiled a DC cinematic universe, showing us that the multiverse universes and multiple versions of famous heroes can and do coexist, at least in the previous version of the DCU. From the Popverse, there's an article that talks about all the cameos and surprise superhero appearances in The Flash. And yes, Henry Cavill is part of it. Also, Superman George Reeves, Adam West Batman, Christopher Reeves, Helen Slater, Michael Keaton, George Clooney, Nicolas freaking Cage, Jay Garrick, the actor from like the 90s version of The Flash, Ben Affleck's Batman, Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman. It's pretty much every version of The Flash, every version of Superman, Supergirl, Batman. And whether or not you like the movie is not really the point. You could have thought it was the greatest movie ever or the worst movie ever, like a lot of people feel. Bottom line, in the DCU, they did introduce this concept of these alternate dimensions, right? This multiverse. And while The Flash wasn't created by James Gunn, the version that we got was approved by James Gunn. And that's an important part. Now, perhaps it was just movies that they were making at the tail end of the last DCEUs. But I do believe that there were some rewrites and there were some things that were removed, things that were edited, and for a reason. And while I have previously criticized James Gunn in not utilizing that movie to sort of bridge the gap between the DCEU and the DCU, I'm starting to think that with this theory, it's a possibility that they did. in showing how insane that movie was and how crazy the multiverse was, with George Clooney showing up at the end, also shows that the movie is not important in its original story, but it's more important in that it introduced the multiverse and what the DCU is capable of. Now, the multiverse is a bad word nowadays. No one wants to see multiverse attached to their comic book franchise. But I believe that we need this tool in order to bridge the gap between the DCEU and the DCU. And if it's done correctly, then it could be really great. I think the reason people don't like the term multiverse is because it's been done incorrectly by the MCU. That doesn't mean James Gunn can't do it correctly. Now, what does that mean? Alternate timelines can play out, right? Characters who were seemingly retired could reappear as parallel universe variants of those characters, aka Henry Cavill, Ultraman, Superman, etc. Ben Affleck's Batman, George Clooney's Batman, whatever. This sets the stage for an alternate Superman to emerge without erasing the new one. In other words, DC has given itself a plot device to bridge the gap between the DCEU and the DCU. But let's talk about current, definitely James Gunn related evidence that could support this theory. Because The Flash was at the tail end of the DCEU, and James Gunn most likely was just trying to get it out and get it on the shelves because it had to be done. But Peacemaker Season 2 is a whole other story. That is a current, in development, in the can, promoted by James Gunn, written by James Gunn project that is coming out about a month and a half after Superman comes out in July. And in the trailer that came out prior to the Superman release, we have some evidence we need to discuss. James Gunn's irreverent TV series might seem far removed from Superman, but its upcoming Season 2 actually dives straight into the multiverse theory. And immediately, with the first trailer. Well, let's talk about why. The first trailer for Peacemaker Season 2 ends with a jaw-dropping reveal. John Cena's Peacemaker comes face to face with a second Peacemaker. The trailer shows Chris Smith encountering an alternate version of himself, signaling the multiverse component to the series. Also, aside from the obvious multiverse variant of Peacemaker, where he literally has a different logo on his chest, one that is pointing up instead of pointing down, we also have crossover from the Superman trailer. We have Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl, Maxwell Lord, and yes, Frank Grillo's Rick Flag Sr. And Frank Grillo did drop some hints at what we can expect. This is what he said. We do get into it. I'm not going to give anything away. It's an interesting thing about Peacemaker and his perspective about my son and what his feelings are about himself because of that. So we did get into some tangles, but I don't know that people are going to expect what's going to happen. But let's be real. This trailer supports the idea that an alternate version of an alternate universe exists. Peacemaker walks through a door that is probably now in the hands of Argus, which is being ran by Frank Grillo's Rick Flag Sr., previously Amanda Waller. And that technology allows him to cross over into a universe that is not his, to see a version of himself that is either a deep villain or a hero, who knows. A version of himself that appears to be more successful. Why is that important? Well, because this version of Peacemaker, very specifically, exists in canon according to James Gunn. And if the character exists in canon according to James Gunn, and the characters around the character exist, and the events that happened exist, they saved the world from the butterflies. And if Guy Gardner and Hawkgirl and Maxwell Lord and the Justice Gang exist in this universe, then that means Henry Cavill, Superman, Ben Affleck's Batman, Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, Jason Momoa's Aquaman, and yes, even Ezra Miller's Flash exist in this universe. Perhaps they don't exist in the same universe, but they exist in this canon. In fact, Peacemaker using the technology to go into another universe might be the way we get Peacemaker from the DCEU, that exact character, into the new DCU. In fact, the Peacemaker in the current DCU, which is also played by John Cena, could possibly just be the new DCU's version of Peacemaker. And when Peacemaker original goes to that universe, maybe he's forced to kill him and take over that role. Maybe he brings his friends with him, and that's how we get a connection to the original Peacemaker series. More importantly, though, that technology exists. It exists, and Argus will have access to it because they're chasing Chris Smith, aka Peacemaker. They will 100% get this technology if they don't already have access to it, which means that Waller has access to this technology. In fact, the Frank Grillo we see in Peacemaker Season 2's trailer might not be the same Frank Grillo we see in the Superman trailer. It might be an entirely different person. So let's say these characters have access to this technology, right? Don't you think Lex Luthor, who also is rumored to have his own pocket universe, has access to this technology? What if he needs to bring someone over that is as powerful as Superman? Bottom line is, the trailer is literally proving that James Gunn's storytelling is embracing the multiverse idea. Perhaps not in the Superman, but definitely beyond the Flash and into Peacemaker Season 2. And if Peacemaker can cross into alternate worlds, then an alternate version of the Man of Steel can also cross into alternate worlds. And it showcases crossover characters like Green Lantern, Maxwell Lord, Hawkgirl, Frank Grillo's Rick Flag Sr., etc., etc., which means it's only reinforcing the multiverse concept. Now let's talk about Ultraman, who obviously isn't in the Peacemaker trailer, but he is in the Superman trailer, and he's clearly an antagonist of some point. Let's clarify who Ultraman is in the DC Comics and why this character is important to the theory. In the DC lore, Ultraman is literally an evil version of Superman from a parallel Earth. First introduced in 1964, Ultraman hails from Earth 3, a reverse universe where good is evil and evil is good. He's often depicted as the leader of the crime syndicate of America, which is basically the Justice League's villainous counterpart. Just imagine if the Justice League were all bad guys. Ruthless, corrupt tyrants, right? That's Ultraman and his team. On Earth 3, Ultraman usually has powers similar to Superman, but with a dark, messed up twist. For example, classic comics give Ultraman bizarrely inverted weaknesses and strengths. Kryptonite actually makes him stronger, and sunlight makes him weaker. Literally the opposite of Superman's vulnerabilities. This is the important part. Evil Superman, aka Ultraman, literally snorts kryptonite like a drug to power up. The key point is, Ultraman is evil Superman. He's a version of Superman that is a bad guy. And instead of the S on his chest, he has a U, like the character in the trailer. And notice that the character in the trailer is covered head to toe with dark glasses and a black suit. One reason that would be is to protect him from sunlight. But another reason that can be is that they're hiding who it is underneath the suit. Now, some critics of this theory can say, well, because they don't want to tell the audience that that's David Cornswet Superman underneath the suit. They don't want to give it away that's an evil version of Superman. Well, that would make sense if the character was the same height as David Cornswet. I mean, could this be a production oversight and they didn't put an actor in the suit that was the same height as David Cornswet? Perhaps it is David Cornswet underneath that suit, and James Gunn is hiding that fact so that it's a surprise for the audience. Or perhaps he's utilizing the idea that he is weakened by sunlight to cover him head to toe, to also hide the fact that the actor that is in that suit playing Ultraman is, coincidentally, the actor that previously played Superman in Man of Steel, Henry freaking Cavill. Now, of course, James Gunn has not actually introduced the crime syndicate. And outside of toys and other things, there's no actual evidence that this is Ultraman, except for the toys do literally say, this is Ultraman. He has the U on his chest like Ultraman. He is covered head to toe. He's clearly not affected by kryptonite. And he's just as strong as our version of Superman, seemingly telling you that he has the same power set as Superman, which would tell me that Ultraman in this movie is a version of Superman. And either it's a bizarro version of Superman, like it's actually David Cornsweat in that suit, and that's the big reveal when he takes his mask off, that it's Ultraman, but David Cornsweat, or it's some genetic monster, aka Bizarro, created by Lex Luthor from David Cornsweat's blood, and that's why he's covered head to toe. I'm not sure, because it could be Bizarro. It could be a Bizarro thing where he's affected negatively by sunlight and kryptonite actually powers him up, and he could be merging the two concepts of Bizarro and Ultraman together to create a whole new sort of version of the story. Entirely possible. And that would explain how Lex Luthor can actually get into the Fortress of Solitude, that he needed some kind of Kryptonian DNA, and because Ultraman is with him in that scene, that's how he can get into the fortress and cause all that havoc and trouble. The very fact that Ultraman is covered head to toe is intriguing. I mean, it could be a surprise casting where it's, like I said, Henry Cavill. It could be that it's a version of Superman, aka David Cornsweat. But if I was trying to keep the Ultraman character a secret and who it was, I gotta say, especially if it was Cavill, putting him in a full helmet and mask for all the marketing materials and toys, that would do the trick. And it would be canonically correct. It would fit the lore. It would serve two purposes. I don't think the David Cornsweat reveal would be remotely as shocking or interesting as if it was a different actor, aka Henry Cavill. And I also don't think that the production is so sloppy that they would get someone who is not the same height as David Cornsweat to play the character in shots where Ultraman is literally walking alongside David Cornsweat. They wouldn't do that. They would want to get someone that is the same height so that it wouldn't be obvious. I don't feel like that is a production oversight. And I could be reading too much into it. Maybe the camera angle and perspective is fooling me into thinking that this person is slightly shorter than David Cornsweat. Maybe I'm getting a little too sweaty with the details. Another thing that supports my theory is that Daniel Rickman, aka Daniel RPK, reported that David Cornsweat would be playing Ultraman. And the reason why that supports my theory is because Daniel RPK is consistently incorrect. He is, for some reason, a scooper that has given all this credibility when he has literally none. So when he says things, I can often say that's probably not true. Sometimes he can be right because he throws a bunch of crap at the wall and some of it sticks, but often the guy is wrong. Now, it's entirely possible that it is David Cornsweat, and this is just some kind of concept of Bizarro, or even Nuclear Man, or something like that from the old Christopher Reeves movies. Some kind of dark duplicate of Superman born from science and Lex Luthor. Entirely possible, and they were just given the name Ultraman and the logo to throw people off. Totally possible. But wouldn't it be fascinating if Gunn got the actor that played the previous version of Superman to play an evil version of the character for his universe, and purposely released the Peacemaker Season 2 trailer to tease the concept of the multiverse prior to the movie, almost like he's setting up the concept before the movie even hits theaters. In fact, Adam Holmes from Cinema Blend pretty much agrees with me. He expressed some disappointment at the idea, arguing that if you're going to be using Ultraman, then it should be the multiverse version and not some generic clone. He wrote, "I just don't like that they're called Ultraman. Traditionally in DC lore, Ultraman is an evil doppelganger from Earth 3. If you're turning the character into a generic clone, just call him something else rather than co-opt the name Ultraman. In other words, calling a clone Ultraman feels off, unless there's something more to the story. Unless there is some kind of misdirect. And I do believe James Gunn is a brilliant creative. No doubt that this movie has some twists and turns that are gonna rile up our emotions. And Henry Cavill being revealed as Ultraman would be next level. Of course, Ultraman's mask is going to be removed at some point. The same article actually holds out hope. My fingers are crossed that he'll end up being a different DC character and that the Ultraman name was just a misdirect. The author even suggests that maybe it could be a Bizarro under the mask. But I want you to consider the possibility that when the mask comes off, we see a familiar face. We see Henry Cavill. Not a clone, but a visage of the previous Superman. From Earth 3, the Ultraman that is powered by kryptonite and weakened by sunlight. The same guy that happens to also be a few inches shorter than David Corenswet. Has a bulkier physique. Either they got a stunt double and a stand-in to wear that suit that happens to be a little beefier than David Corenswet and a little shorter than David Corenswet, and it's just a production mistake. And when the mask comes off, what we're going to see is a Bizarro version of David Corenswet, which would probably still be pretty cool. Or it's a different actor completely playing the character. And if you're going to get a different actor to play the character, why would you hide that? Why would you hide who's playing the character? Unless the reveal is so massive for fans that you have to hide it. That you have to show screeners of this movie that are effectively incomplete. That don't show who the character is or what their motivations were. There are screeners for this movie that aren't even the version we're going to see in theaters. This is a huge thing. I think they're hiding that reveal because it's a big deal in the movie. And I think more importantly, that big deal is meant to invoke emotion. And what would be even more emotional than seeing our previous version of Superman playing the character of Ultraman? I am hoping that mask comes off at some point in the third act and it gets ripped off and it's revealed Henry Cavill and the theater loses their minds. I'm hoping that we get raucous, roaring, screaming, laughter, excitement, crying. I want the theater to be just as emotional as I am when I'm watching this movie, and I believe that the event that we can get from this movie can be so much more powerful if Henry Cavill was in that mask. And if I was James Gunn, I would tell no one. I would have shot everything on set with a stunt double. Everything that included Henry Cavill with the mask off would have been done in private. It would have been a closed set with as minimal people as possible. I would have done all my shooting, all my public stuff outside with a stunt double. And then behind the scene on a closed soundstage with a handful of people, I would have done the reveal shots. And only David Corenswet, Peter Safran, and James Gunn, and yes, Henry Cavill, would even know that this happened. And when I showed screeners, I would never reveal who was in the mask. I would make sure that twist, that scene, was conveniently cut out of the movie. And I gotta say, if he did that, if this movie is what I think it is, if James Gunn is the creative that I believe he is, and he honors the comic books the way we want him to, this movie is going to be the event of the summer. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on just how insane this movie can be. But what do you think? Do the research yourself. I will put every link to every article, every Reddit post, every image I found in the description of this video. I don't want to hold you guys here for too long. I can make this a 2.5 hour video, or I can give you my thoughts and let you do the research yourself. Look at the description and check out all those links. Different production quirks that really lend credit to this theory. At the very least, that this could be a Bizarro Superman. I'm holding out hope that we might actually get a Henry Cavill in this. And you can call me crazy all you want, but I think it would be a huge twist. It would be a massive bump to the movie. And it would get people talking on their way out of the theater. People would be calling, texting, and posting about this nonstop. It would be a massive fan reaction. It would be a next level cameo. And if James Gunn does it, then I want to make sure that I'm on record saying that it was possible, at the very least. Let me know what you guys think. Hit the comment section. Hit the description. On the way there, please like and subscribe. And I'll see you later on this week. Here comes the